Welcome to the latest episode of our Take 3 series, where we get a monthly dose of inspiration from trailblazing and inspiring women. I'm Wendy Doyle, President and CEO of United We. Today, I'm excited to talk with Karyn Page, Vice President of Innovation at Envision. Over a career spanning 2 decades, Karyn has worked closely with the public and private sectors advocating for supportive policy as president and CEO of Kansas Global Trade Services. Now in her role at Envision, Karyn pursues new opportunities for people who are blind or visually impaired to ensure an inclusive workplace for all. Karyn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Wendy, thank you for inviting me. This is exciting and what a great way to start my day.
I'd love to talk more about your career, Karyn. You spent years promoting Wichita on an international stage and now work for Envision, a very powerful nonprofit in Wichita that has a reach that is extremely broad and beyond Wichita. How have you taken your experience and learnings from Global Trade Service to help improve the lives of people who are blind or visually impaired?
Wendy, that's a great question. And I want to spend a minute to talk about it. When I decided that I wanted to embark on the next phase of my career, I realized that I had to reinvent myself or translate my global skills or the skills that I was using and to promote and facilitate international trade into something else. And so I spent quite a bit of time talked to trusted advisors. Actually, most of them were women, but not exclusively so. And said, "What do you think that I do best? How do you think that I present? What skills do you think are translatable to other fields?" And then really just reinvented my LinkedIn profile and in my resume. And so those skills specifically are really working with processes, influencing culture, putting together programs that impact lots of folks, putting together systems. People sometimes call me a systems integrator. So those are really translatable to any field. In international trade, it's a lot of moving parts. It's not highly complicated, but there's a lot of parts. So I always tell people you don't have to be a rocket scientist, but you need to understand business, and you need to be, comfortable with different rules and different regimes, and then adapt to that. It's the same system, same kind of challenges that I face at Envision. My job at Envision, I always explain it as simply as I can, is twofold. On one hand, it's preparing employees who are blind or visually impaired for professional careers. And on the other hand, equally important is preparing employers to receive the talent. And so it's looking at different systems, what skills are needed, what gaps are there, and then figuring out how in a collaborative way to put everything together to come up with a great result. And so far, 7 months, it's been successful. We've got a long ways to go, but we're making headway, and it's really exciting to have this kind of impact.
Thank you for that, Karyn. One thing I just want to, underscore what you said for our viewers is you are really good at, really surrounding yourself with people to help identify if there is an area that, I love that you surrounded yourself with advisors or an area that you may want to work on or improve. I think that's a key takeaway, to build our, kind of advisory board to help us, continue to excel, celebrate with us, but also, help us improve too. So I love that. That's a great takeaway.
And I think a key point in that is trusted advisors. I want people to speak truth to me, to be transparent. I love constructive criticism. And just to kind of hold all this together, for years, one of my dearest friends has said, "Karyn, you have more mentors than anyone I know." And the reason is because I ask for help. I love getting that feedback. I believe that all of us have room for improvement. And I love, talking to the people that I know, that I trust, to speak truth to me and say, "You can do this better. And I know if you do it better, then you're going to have more impact."
I love that. Really good. Really good. So the second question is, you've advocated for policy improvements at the state, federal, and global levels to remove market barriers and to fund programs. What are some of the barriers that continue to exist, and how can others join in reducing them, especially barriers for women?
That's a great question. So the way I look at overcoming barriers, I guess is the way to say it, is I try to find the greatest common denominator. In the case of international trade, I really focused on what do I need to do to help small businesses be successful? And I said something really silly like, if we help small business, we help all business. So it's the same kind of thing at Envision and the same kinds of challenges that we're working on. If I'm helping people who are blind or visually impaired, it's not a great big denominator, but it's a big problem to solve. So one of the things that I think that affects all people, and in particular, I think women, that we deal with at Envision is public transportation efficiency. This is a big deal. If you're blind or visually impaired, you don't drive a car, and living in the Midwest and in many cities, you have to drive to get to and from work or the grocery store or a doctor's office. And if we don't have really solid public transport that provides on-demand transportation, it really is a burden. Another thing that is really prevalent that comes up, not as often, but certainly is there, is as daycare services. So women in particular, I think, are impacted by this. We usually often are the caregivers in our households. And so if you're dealing with a transportation issue, and you have to work and you have to pay your bills and you might be blind or visually impaired or some other disability, and you have a family to take care of, you really need to have those flexible daycare services or childcare services to make it all work. And then let me just say one more thing about that, Wendy. I'm participating in Wichita on a future of work, I'll call it a conversation, with some of the leaders in Wichita. And those two things have been really prominent in our conversation. That is coordinated by the Greater Wichita Partnership, and it's being facilitated by Deloitte. So hopefully we'll have some really good action items that come out of it. And I'm really happy. I told some of my colleagues at Envision that I have not had to say to any of the other 20 people in the group, please take care of public transportation or daycare. Everyone's talking about these things. So I'm hopeful that we'll get some improvement.
Two really important points there from a policy perspective. And one thing that we are really working on as an organization at United We is working at, through our appointments project, trying to get a woman appointed to those transportation boards and commissions at whatever level, because we agree, that is, a barrier. And then secondly, the childcare is, thank you for being a champion of that. It's a complex challenge. It was an industry that was, already propped up, but the pandemic really highlighted, really challenged it. So we've got some work to do to get women back to work through childcare. So thanks for pointing that out.
Well, and let me just say this, at Envision, we actually have a childcare service in our building, provides service for both typically sighted children and children who are blind or visually impaired and may have some other disabilities. And one of the things that we're working on is, I think part of the problem with daycare services or childcare services is the pay rate. And so we've been having these internal conversations about how do we continue to provide this amazing service that has so much impact and in a sustainable way. Companies like Envision, not just directly, childcare services, are really having to deal with these compensation issues.
Well said, and we completely agree with you. I think that's a great segue into our final question, which is based on your experience. We've identified childcare, but what are some steps a company can take in making a more inclusive workplace?
Oh, that is such a great question. It's something I deal with every day. So first step is awareness. And this may seem like I'm just kind of, softball answer, but I believe that if we create opportunities for experience in a safe place, that it elevates our awareness. Once we elevate our awareness of what it means to have people who have differences in our organizations, then we can begin to take steps to make a welcoming and inclusive environment. That future of work conversation, I love the word that we're using, is to create a space of belonging. So it's not just about diversity, right? That's okay. First, recognize there's diverse people in our world, but then include them. But then you have to actually take it one step further, and that is create spaces where we can all belong and thrive. And so that would be awareness, inclusivity, and then what do we have to do to make sure people feel that they belong? And that is, I think it's a bit of an art form, but I think it really begins with this awareness that creates the opportunity for empathy. If we begin with being empathetic toward another human being, I think we can go a long way. At Envision, I say humans first, humans first. My staff are all human beings. They have challenges and needs, just like everyone else. And then we always start with the place humans first and then solve from there. And so that would be the advice I would give. It's just be aware, be empathetic. We're all human. Let's help each other just belong in a way that we can thrive.
I love that. Empathy is such a great word, and awareness and, just being human about the workplace. I love that. Karyn, thank you so much for being a woman who supports women, other women, for your leadership, for being a trailblazer, and for your commitment in advocating for others across Kansas and our country. Thanks to everyone for tuning in to our Take 3 video segment, and we hope you have a great day.